good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this week's Zoominar, which is on accountancy. And we are really lucky to have Linda Botha and Reza Hooda here to speak to us today. I'm just submitting someone else, both of whom are partners in their law firms. Linda is in London and Reza is on the South Coast. Oh, I'm still admitting people, latecomers. It's much easier for me to let Linda and Reza talk about themselves, and so we really can just crack on. So Linda, as I can see you on my screen at the moment, so can you tell us what exactly you do and what your role is within your organisation? Oh, I can't hear you.
Here we go.
Okay, that's perfect.
You got me now? Okay.
Yeah.
So I am a partner in a firm in London, an accounting practice in London. There are 16 partners. The firm's called SRLV. I work in the corporate and audit division of that practice, and one of the partners there. I assist with the audit of clients that require statutory audits as a result of their size, and also just our corporate clients that need any sort of assistance, sort of consultancy, if it's to do with VAT, tax, all those sorts of things. And we also do things like corporate finance and due diligence work, which is quite interesting. And our division also does all the sort of the different work that needs an opinion of some description. So, for example, solicitors' accounts need to have a review done. Charities, as you know, Naomi, need to have independent examinations or an audit done, depending on their size. So our division, or our part of the practice, does all of that work.
That's great, and I'll dig into it a bit deeper. But Reza, what about you? What is your role within your organisation? What do you do?
So I am technically a partner in the firm, the managing partner, albeit I kind of run the firm because my partner has virtually retired. So I run a small practice. It's called Walsh & Co. It's just outside Southampton on the sunny South Coast. We employ 7 full-time staff, and we are a full practice firm apart from audits. So we don't do audits anymore. We used to. So we do everything that you'd expect an accountancy firm to do, the accounts, the taxes, the bookkeeping, the VAT, all that fun stuff. But really our growth area over the last couple of years has been actually providing a full outsourced finance function for small companies. So rather than them having to employ their own finance staff, we can take care of the full finance function, right from bookkeeper to CFO and anything in between, much more cost effectively than small businesses employing their own staff. So that's the growth area that we're in, which perhaps we can talk on a bit later.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually, because then everyone can see what a full service of accountancy can look like. So Linda, within your organisation, how does your role fit into the bigger picture? You said you work in the auditing side. What other areas are there, and what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
So our practice is actually quite well known in the music and entertainment industry. Probably half of our practice is to do with music and entertainment, and that part of the practice does kind of a bit like what Reza's just been talking about, but for those kind of clients. So they do the whole back office service. We make payments for the clients. If the client wants, some cash, one of the guys will run down to the bank and go and get the cash out. If they need help with doing forecasting, or if they're doing a tour, we'll help them with making payments and doing cash flows and forecasts and all of that kind of stuff. So that side of our practice is pretty big. And then the other sort of 50% of the practice is really where I fit in, our side, which is more, we look after owner-managed businesses. So some of them are really tiny, just starting out, and they just need a little bit of help because they can't employ somebody that is a qualified accountant because it's too expensive for such a small business. Or we do, on the other side of it, we have clients that are pretty big. I mean, turnovers of 1.5 million, and we're doing the audit of them. So our range of the work that we do is actually quite significant.
Okay. And Reza, what I'd be interested to know is, I know that you started off in PwC. So Reza, would you be able to give like a potted history of your career to date, how you started, how you trained, and how you got to where you are today?
Sure, yes. So I did start off in PwC. I actually fell into accountancy, and believe it or not, I studied international business and French at university, and then as you do, as you get to the point where you start applying for jobs, I started applying to anywhere and everywhere that would take me, and I guess I had two options. I applied for roles where I could use my French, and then I applied for other roles like management consulting, accounting, and that kind of good stuff. And I had two offers that I then had to decide upon. I had an offer from Renault, the car company, which would have allowed me to go onto their grad scheme and use my French and live in France, which I had done for a year during the course of my degree. And I had this offer from PwC to become trained as a chartered accountant, and it was quite a difficult one. I remember at the time kind of choosing one between the two, because I really enjoyed French and I enjoyed living in France, and I wanted to continue using the language. And I knew that if I chose PwC, then that part of my studies would kind of be left behind. So it was a difficult decision, but I took the PwC offer on the basis that it would have allowed me to continue studying, to gain a really lucrative and highly beneficial qualification, being the chartered accountancy qualification, which obviously in hindsight I'm very glad I did, because what that allows you to do, it opens so many more doors, and you have like a contingency. You can always fall back on it, even if you end up doing other things afterwards. Just having that chartered accountancy qualification behind you is really great for your career. So long story short, I joined PwC. I trained for 3 years to become a chartered accountant. I actually, sort of going back a bit, I actually applied for a role in tax. Now, when you apply for jobs within these big firms, you can apply for audit, you can apply for corporate finance, for tax, and for different areas within the practice, because they're such huge firms that you have the option for deciding which particular element of the firm you want to go into. And I chose tax purely because it sounded easier to get into, because everybody was applying for audit, because it was sold so well by the big firms that you get all this great commercial and business exposure. And so everyone went into audit, and I thought, oh, let me apply for tax. There's fewer spaces, but no one's going to apply for that because it sounds really boring. And I'm so glad I did, because I grew to love tax. And tax is actually quite interesting because it's the stuff that clients love. And when you save clients tax, they love you. Whereas when you're an auditor, what you do is you're actually a pain in the backside. You're going into companies and you're asking them for this and asking them for that and ticking boxes. And actually, when I was in practice, my auditor colleagues did so many more hours than I did. They started early and they were traveling all around the country, which is great at first, great novelty, travel expenses. But working in a factory on a winter's day in Coventry on November is, novelty wears off and it becomes a bit tiresome. So, tax was great for me. I grew to love it. I did my CA, and then after my chartered accountancy, I started the chartered tax advisor qualification, and I qualified in that. And I became a manager at PwC, and that's kind of where my PwC journey ended. And that then led me to a point where I got to manager level, and I was always quite entrepreneurial. I always knew I wanted to set up a business for myself. I didn't see myself staying at PwC for 10 years to make partner. I wanted to do it at a fairly young age. So the opportunity came along to buy into a small practice. It was actually run by my father-in-law, and he was considering his retirement options. He was looking at selling his practice. So we got talking and we agreed terms for me to buy in. And I did that in 2008. So I took a loan out and bought into the practice. And then I was in control. So I had the freedom to kind of take this accountancy business and take it in a direction that I wanted to, that, I felt that it could go in. So I ended up, coming in and using the knowledge I'd gained in PwC to add value to existing clients, to build the systems, to work on, it was a very traditional firm. So we worked on modernizing it and getting it all digital. And yeah, ever since it's been a great journey. taking the practice from where it was to where it is today.
That's really interesting and really helpful. And funnily enough, we had a Zoominar with a lawyer a couple of weeks ago, and she said, and she gave advice that if you ever wanted to get a good job in law, go for tax law, because she said people think you're really boring, but if you're a nice person, you've got loads of character and charisma, people are always going to love tax lawyers, and you're always going to get a good job from it. So that was her advice as well, to go for tax, because it's a bit more interesting than people give it credit for. And what about you, Linda? What about your history to date?
You may have heard I have a slightly non-English accent. May have picked up on it. So I am South African, and I actually qualified in South Africa. The firm that I work for has an international affiliation or an association with global firms, and I qualified in our Cape Town affiliate. And then came over to London on a sort of a job swap, actually. Really enjoyed it and ended up deciding to stay, and have been with them ever since. I've been with the firm that I'm at now since 2006. So I've been there quite a while. I joined them as a manager in the audit division, and in that period then obviously worked my way up through the ladder. I think I have to agree with Reza in terms of people hate auditors. All your clients, it's an inconvenience. It really is an inconvenience for them. And I always say to our staff, when you're going out there, approach it from their point of view. So don't walk in and kind of go, well, I'm here to check your work, because they're going to instantly just be like, just get out. I'm not going to help you. But if you go in and you kind of make friends and you just say, you know what, I can't figure this out, can you help me? They're much more inclined to kind of, if the client has made a mistake or there is something not quite right, they're more inclined to kind of go, oh, you know what, I think, and you kind of work it through and you get to a better answer. So I think it's about, there's an old sort of saying about accountants being, in a grey suit, in the corner, without much personality. I think it's actually the opposite. I think what you need to do well in this business is the opposite. You need to be a people person. You need to be able to encourage your clients to tell you things that maybe they wouldn't necessarily want to tell you. The things you need to know, you need to be able to draw that information out to them. So I really think you need to be a people person in this business.
And tell me, you sounded a bit disparaging about auditing, but what do you like about auditing?
I love it. I have to say, I mean, it's not disparaging. I think there is, your clients don't necessarily appreciate an audit because they're forced by the regulations and the law in the country to have this cost, to them. So they need to be able to see value. So what's challenging and exciting in an audit is to make a client feel like they've received value from the work that you've done that they didn't necessarily want done. Do you know what I mean? I mean, they're forced to do it. They have to spend this money. So helping the clients to see value for me is good. It's never the same job ever. Every single job you do is different. Even if you're going to the same client every year, there's always changes. There's always something that's different. There's always a different way that you can look at something or help them with something. In the size of practice that we are, we're around 200 people. You get to form a really good relationship with your client where they trust you and they understand, what your role is, but they'll come to you with problems and they want us to help them solve, their issues, their business issues that they're coming up against. And I don't know, for me, it's interesting. Every job is different.
And you also, when we were talking last week, Linda, you said to me that you thought initially that you were going to do the kind of Deloitte route in, and actually that changed, and you thought that was all the better for your career, didn't you? Can you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, when I so in South Africa, it's slightly different in that you have to actually do a degree in accounting, and you have to do your honours in accounting and financial accounting and things like that. And So when I was in my honours year, my last year at uni, basically, I went and applied for a role and I got accepted into Deloitte's graduate program. And I failed one of my papers in my honours year. And in order to pass your honours year, you have to pass all 4 papers in one sitting. So it meant I had to rewrite all 4 papers. And Deloitte has got a pretty strict policy in terms of when they accept people and how they do that. And so they wanted me to redo my entire honours year at university in order to stay in the program. And I couldn't afford to do that. I couldn't afford to not be working for another year and redo my university. And I ended up finding a smaller practice that was happy for me to do my university year, sort of a distance learning, and start my training contract at the same time. And for me, looking back at it now, I've got family and friends who have done the training contract through Deloitte and PwC and things. And I realized that for me, the smaller practice was definitely better because I've been able to get involved in so much more. I think Reza mentioned it when he was talking about his experience. And when you go into a bigger firm, you choose one line. Do you want to do tax? Do you want to do audit? Do you want to do corporate finance? Whereas in a smaller practice, there's not enough people to divide it up into that much division. So you end up doing, like I explained, I do a bit of corporate finance, I do audit work, I do consultancy work, I do some tax, I do a bit of VAT work. And it's meant that I've had a much broader experience. That's not to say the big firms aren't fantastic at what they do. And they also give an amazing training. And I think it depends where you want to go and what you want to do, which one might work better for you.
So Reza, do you think it worked better for you doing it big first and then honing smaller?
I think it definitely helps in terms of, you can't go wrong having a big firm's name on your CV.
Definitely.
If you want to go into banking or industry, having one of the big 4, big 6 on there is not going to do you any harm.
And when you say the big 4, big 6, who are you referring to?
So the big 4 are KPMG, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, and PwC. And then when you say big 6, it's normally Grant Thornton and BDO. I think they're still the kind of the big 6, between them. But in terms of, I think actually now, given the way that technology has really transformed the accounting industry, I believe the smaller firms are actually ahead of the bigger firms when it comes to embracing this tech and actually providing a lot more value to businesses. So I actually, for the last year or so, I've been coaching and mentoring other accountancy firm owners on how to build more successful, enjoyable, and impactful accounting firms. So I've got a good understanding of the accountancy firm landscape. I work with about 500 to 1,000 accountancy firms in the UK and abroad. And what I'm encouraging them to do is to take on this concept of the finance function, because what tech has enabled us to do is to actually do a lot more of what we were trained to do in the first place. You see, the last sort of 30 years, accountants have become very complacent because of this model of we do your accounts, and as long as the accountant doesn't mess up, the client comes back for more in the following year. And accountants have got very cozy, or the older accountant generation, with this recurring fee model that they do the accounts and then the next year, nothing happens and they come back again. And it's always been reporting on history, which as far as a client is concerned, is not very useful to them running their business. Coming up with figures 9 months after the year end, which is when accounts are due, to tell a business owner, this is how you did 9 months ago, is no use to him whatsoever in the present day. So what accountants need to be doing now, which is what the small firms are doing, because they've been agile enough and dynamic enough to change as the tech has come along, is to say, look, we are here with our experience in accounting, in finance, in cost management, in our experience of dealing with other businesses like you. We can work hand in hand with you as your finance partner and work collaboratively in real time, having access to your finances in real time, because now we have, bank feeds which deliver the information into the software that can connect with other apps. So for those of you on here, there are two big software in the marketplace at the moment for accountants. One is Xero and the other is QuickBooks. And you've probably seen their adverts around on TV and billboards. And what these guys are like the Apple and the Android. So consider Xero and QuickBooks like Apple and Android, and they have this app ecosystem. So once you have Xero, you can then connect in other apps into Xero to give you, for example, stock management, work management, or management reporting or cash flow. So people have developed these apps and now they feed into this ecosystem, which means it's such an exciting place for someone if you're interested in technology, particularly if you're interested in how to make things more efficient, in how data can be moved from one place to another to give real insights to business owners to help them make more meaningful decisions. That's the role we're playing now. And that's the really exciting bit, that we are adding so much more value now than we ever have done because of tech and the different ways of working.
That's really great. And I think actually I'm using Xero myself and it's really, really user friendly. It is something that I suppose everybody on this call could actually get and practice with, because it must be a very, very useful tool, even with your own finances, or if you're about to go to university, you really could you think, Reza, you could start to use these tools to your advantage?
Yeah, absolutely. You by all means, there's so many sort of videos on YouTube as to how it all works. So teach yourself, because these skills will be important. And if you can, when you're applying for jobs, if you can say, yep, I'm already Xero certified, even without having a job, then that will definitely put you in the front line when it comes to the recruitment process, because that will show to your prospective employer that you've been diligent, you've gone out and you've been proactive enough to learn the software, which is something that everyone now is doing when they're entering into accountancy.
That's cool, thank you. And Linda, so if we're thinking about people coming into your firm, and I know that you do have graduate traineeships within your firm, what kind of thing are you looking for in a person if they're coming in? I mean, I know you don't have to have an accountancy degree, but what would you be looking at?
We do look at people's university degrees. And we look at what they've chosen to do, and as long as there's something with substance to it, to their degree, so that it shows that they can study and that they are capable of that sort of hard work, really, because actually doing your training and doing your studying to get your qualification is not an easy task. It's difficult. You've got to put the time in, you've got to put the hours in. So you do want somebody who's already shown that they have capacity to study and that they're good at doing that sort of learning, learning textbooks and understanding and being able to apply that. So we do look at exams, we do look at university results. But then it's more about the rest of what we're looking for is about fit within our teams. So we look at personality. Do we think that this person's going to have the confidence in themselves to ask questions and to be able to question clients? Obviously, as they get more sort of senior, they have to start talking directly to clients, and clients will be saying to them, yeah, this is correct, and don't, sort of, it's fine, leave it, I know it's right. And we need people that have confidence in themselves and can question and are skeptical and have those sort of like inquiring minds, I guess, is probably a good way of describing it. But they also have to be personable. They need to be able to communicate well. So it's at this stage, it's about fit within the team and that personality, and then showing through their university degree or their school and their studies that they're capable of that kind of hard work.
Great. And I'm just asking, Reza, you can answer me this. Do you have to have maths in there? I mean, obviously at GCSE level, but do you have to have maths in there at A level just or to approve of any maths, or is that something that you will just, it's more analytical minds that you need?
Yeah, I wouldn't say you have to have A-level maths. I mean, yes, it's nice to have GCSE maths, of course, at a decent grade would help. because you're not solving technical mathematical problems. Yes, there's a bit of Excel use, but it's more about interpretation of data. And as Linda said earlier, the communication skills are probably the number one. The interpersonal skills, the ability to actually explain jargon into a way that is easy for a layman to understand. That is the key skill, the interpersonal, and being able to take data and make it more meaningful to a client for them to understand. Because we are the financial experts and our clients don't really understand the numbers as well as we do. So we need to be able to explain that in a way that they actually get some benefit from it. But there are lots of skills. I mean, for example, my personal philosophy is we recruit based on values. We have values, and then we recruit based on that. The passion is important for what you do, but I also find out what are your other interests, because for me, and also this is something that perhaps a lot that I teach to other accountants, and I'm a big proponent of culture in accounting firms. And what we have adopted is what's known as a results-only work environment, which means that our people can work when, where, and how they want, as long as the work gets done. So there's no 9 to 5. There's unlimited holidays. As long as the work gets done, they can work from anywhere and how and when and where. This concept pre-pandemic was a bit alien, but post-pandemic, actually, it's become a bit more palatable, because employers have seen that even though people aren't at their desks with their bums on the seats in offices working, work is still getting done. So it's a huge silver lining, and it's helped my cause no end in getting other accounting firms to adopt this working culture. But it just, because we're in the service industry, we don't necessarily have to be in a fixed place of work. The 9 to 5 dates back from the industrial age, and I could give a whole lecture on this, so I won't digress too much into it. But I was going back to, so for example, in our team, I have, so one of our juniors who is doing the AAT qualification. So, I think she didn't go to university, but she did A-levels, and then she's come in, and AAT is the other route that you can take.
What is that exactly, Reza? What does AAT stand for? Or what is it?
AAT is the Association of Accounting Technicians, I believe. And that's kind of a precursor to the chartered qualification. So what you can do, you can leave school and go to college to do AAT, or a specific kind of accountancy training college. And that gives you the grounding in accounting. And then that's kind of a shortcut to doing your ACCA or the ACA, which is the chartered qualification route. So these are the kind of different routes to get into.
Yeah, that's really interesting to know, yes.
And there's also an ATT, which is if you've got a focus in tax and that's what you want to go into, then you can do the Association of Taxation Technicians, which is kind of the tax route into accountancy. The AAT is the general one, and ATT is the tax one. But I think my point was that we have, so one of our juniors does that, but I also found out that she's got a passion for, she's really good at design. She's quite creative, and she's good at kind of video editing. She did that in her pastime. So as well as doing accounting stuff, she also gets involved in our marketing. So she edits all my videos, she designs all my slides, she does all our kind of branding and stuff. So don't just think that your skill set will be limited to just doing accounting, because now accounting firms are not like Linda said. It's no longer grey suits and stuffy, boring people called Alan walking around everywhere. It's there are they're really dynamic. People are wearing t-shirts, and you should see Zero conferences take place, parties, and those are crazy stuff. So accountancy as a profession has changed and is changing dramatically. Just quite a fun place to be in. And whatever skill sets you have, make sure you make those aware to your prospective employers, because they can make use of it, which will allow you to flourish and to build on those skills and actually provide value to your employer.
That's great. And actually, I think in anywhere, once you've got, I'm sure you both can tell me this, but I'm sure there is obviously a set path, I suppose, more if you're graduate, but different if you come into an apprenticeship route, that you get to getting your accountancy qualifications. But I imagine then it's a bit like you might be in the big six or not in the big six, but then you really can go out anywhere, and you don't actually have to go and work in an accountancy firm. There must be no end of different career careers or industries that you can go into with your accountancy qualifications, I presume.
Yes, definitely. And I had many friends when I was training. So typically my audit colleagues would get their qualification after 3 years and then move on to other pastures like investment banking or go into industry. So what that means is that they go and work for a company in the finance division. So they become a finance manager, financial controller, and work their way up to become a financial director, which is quite a lucrative role. So if you think about, the FTSE 100 companies, there is on the board of directors, there's always a finance director, which is a very highly paid job as well as a finance director with, stock options. So you could talk about multi-million pounds you can earn as a finance director. So the industry route is quite attractive, but it means that, you're doing less of the kind of the compliance. You're doing more of actually helping that business grow and systems and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it does open so many doors to you.
Yeah.
So even if you're not quite sure what you want to do, by choosing accountancy, it allows you to have that hybrid of still kind of staying in that study mode. So you're still studying and working at the same time, gaining that exposure. And then once you've got the qualification, then you can decide what you want to do. And you're open to a lot more than you would be had you not undergone that qualification.
No, that's fascinating. That's really great. I think I have a few questions here that our students actually sent in advance, but also if anyone who's listening wants to ask Linda and Reza any questions, then please can you write them in the group chat? That would be absolutely fantastic. Some of these questions might already be asked, so I'll just check. Firstly, could I ask what experiences or qualifications firms expect from graduates from a non-finance background? This student studies politics and international relations. I would appreciate some tips on how to compete for the top jobs. Well, I think you've almost answered this anyway, haven't you, really? Linda, I know you did. I mean, you don't have to have a...
Yeah. We don't insist on an accounting or a maths degree in any way. So what did you say that student was studying?
Politics and international relations.
I mean, that shows that's a nice degree. It shows that they're going to have had to work hard to get a good degree at the end. I mean, for us, we look for minimum sort of 2-1 from a good university with a good degree behind you. But just because you haven't done accounting doesn't mean that you won't be considered for the role. I mean, the schemes like Deloitte and PwC, those ones, they're big graduate schemes. So what you want to do to be getting noticed is probably, Reza mentioned about, he's looking for passion. I think Deloitte, some of the bigger firms, it's the same for them as well. They want to see in your CV that this is really something that you want to do. It's not just because mum and dad said this was a good job to get. This is what you wanted, and you go hard for it.
Cool. No, that's helpful. And I think Reza can answer this one actually. Secondly, what are the career prospects for those who choose to be self-employed or set up their own firms? Is it common, difficult, more lucrative, etc.? Reza.
Yes, I guess it can be, but it's hard work. I probably wouldn't suggest going self-employed or setting up your firm without any experience whatsoever. You kind of need to go and work in an environment to do your studies, find out what it's like to work in a practice, learn the ropes. And the best way of doing that is to work in a practice for somebody else. But if your aim is to set up your own practice one day, then I'd probably recommend you look to go into a smaller firm rather than a bigger firm, because that will give you wider exposure. It means you won't be pigeonholed into one area, like Linda said, into tax, audit, or corporate finance. You'll have an overview of all areas of running a small practice, which is what you will need to set up on your own. So if that's your intention, then I would say, get a few years of experience under your belt, and you can do that whilst you're studying. And once, 3 to 5 years of experience and qualifications, then by all means, if you've got the right experience, you can then go out and set up on your own, which, then gives you the control. You're in charge of your own destiny. You'd be your own boss. and it can be lucrative in the sense of, you control what you earn. At the same time, there is that risk that you're in charge of everything. So, but if you are entrepreneurial, then definitely it's something that you should consider, but get the experience first.
Cool. I have one more question before I see that Jack's asked a question on the chat, but anyone else who wants to ask questions on the chat, please do. What do Reza and Linda think are the main differences between a career in finance and a career in accountancy? Why did they choose accountancy over a role in banking or trading? That's a really interesting question. Linda, do you want to go first on that?
I don't actually know why I never looked at banking or trading. I've never even considered it, to be honest. I've only ever wanted to be an accountant. So I don't really know how to answer. For me, probably personally, banking and trading is quite high risk. You're making risky decisions for other people with their money on a regular basis. I'm naturally risk averse, so it probably wouldn't suit my personality. But to be honest, I never actually even considered it for a career for myself. That's
fair enough. And Reza, what about you? Did you ever think about going into the finance industry or into the city like that?
No, I can't say I did. I mean, I didn't really have the, to be honest, when I was at university, and I kind of just scraped through on a 2-1, so I don't think I could have got into the banking sector anyway. So that's the reason why I didn't go in then, to be brutally honest. I could have, there were some of my colleagues who got the chartered accountancy qualification and then applied to go into Goldman's and Morgan Stanley and the like at that time. But I always had it in mind that I wanted to be my own boss. So for that reason, I wanted to learn the ropes as quickly and efficiently as possible to give me what I needed to then go out on my own. That was always my intention, right from a young age of kind of, I don't like taking orders.
Do you think that, I mean, obviously there are definitely risks, Reza, for being your own boss, and all that comes around running your own business. I know that too. But do you think that accountancy, just in general, they are, as Linda said, a little bit more risk averse than people that go into the banking world or the investment banking world? Do you think there is a difference in personality there?
Possibly to an extent, yes. Although, accountancy is quite varied as well, because you have elements of accountancy like corporate finance. So corporate finance does involve things like, selling businesses, buying and selling businesses, which, is quite, quite dynamic and akin to, things that occur in financial services. So, yeah, it's a mixed bag, really. And some people who are into banking can be quite risk averse as well. They may go into back office functions and that sort of thing. So I don't know. I guess when you're young, I don't know whether you even think about risk profile or whether you're aware of it or not. So I guess just see what do as much research as you can on the potential options available. Talk to people who are in those industries already and the companies, and then make your mind up after you've done your research. I
think a lot of people in those companies do a lot of research, especially in investment banking, before they take the so-called risks anyway. So Jack says, my parents constantly bang on about how accountancy as an industry is still mostly analog, in the sense that it is still pen and paper. Would you both say that in the age of Xero, QuickBooks and the like, that most businesses can put good use of the softwares? And if that is the case, do you think that in the near future there will be a time in which accountants and auditors won't be needed, as there is software available that could replace the need for them? Linda, you just posted. Linda, what do you think?
To be honest, I don't think that accountants themselves will be replaced by the software. What we're finding is the software is doing the more data processing kind of what we do, and I think that there will always be a place for accountants to come up with you'll see it when you study accountancy. It's not always black and white. There is a lot in what we do that you as an individual, with your experience and with your knowledge of accounting and the rules and requirements, have to make a decision about whether this transaction fits into this category or into that category, and how do you place it. Certainly at the moment, the technology is, or the AI is not equipped for those kind of decisions, and I do think there's always going to be a place for human interface. But I do think that the basics of what accountants do, so the bookkeeping element, is more and more now being done by the tech, like Reza was talking about. And that's a good thing, because it frees up in a practice like ours, and clearly, as Reza's been saying in his, it frees up your staff's time, and they get to do the more challenging stuff rather than just the data entry, which is boring. So for me, I think it's a good thing.
You can throw that back at the businesses to do their own data entry, and you can do the fun stuff. Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, Reza?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree totally with Linda. It's the processing side which is being automated to an extent, and the fun part is that, you know, we as accountants are part of that in making it happen, in linking the software together and working out, you know, how best to integrate it, and then, you know, letting the machine do its thing, and then it's quite exciting to see the output. And if there's any errors in it, then, you know, we can go in and sort it. But yeah, it does make time for us to do what we were trained to do, to actually give meaning to the numbers, which is,
exactly,
you know, our role as the trusted advisor for clients, as, you know, the accountant who understands the finances, in helping a business owner to get to from where they are to where they want to be, to help them achieve their goals and objectives in life, and to be, you know, their financial partner along the way.
That's cool. Thank you. That's good. Then Tom has asked, what would you suggest people should do while studying university to make you stand out when you're moving into accountancy after graduating?
Oh, that's quite tricky. You know, I look for things where I can see that people have been applying themselves, not just to their studies, but also to, going back to the same comments that we've made, being able to work in a team, being able to communicate effectively. So if they can be part of things in their university and they can show that they've had to do you know, a lot of teamwork, because that's a lot of what we do is in teams, especially from an audit perspective. We send out a team of people, and you have people that are more junior all the way up to more senior. So being able to effectively, you know, follow command.
Oh, your thingy.
Sorry, have you got me back?
Yeah.
Okay. Take commands from more senior people, but still be able to communicate when they don't understand or don't quite agree, but do it in a good way. Those sort of leadership skills. So if you can be part of teams, that you can then in your CV show that you've been doing those things and that you understand that that's one of the things that's required. That for me is a bit of a standout. I like to see that.
Okay, great. And do you think, can you add anything to that, Reza?
Yes, what I would say is, you know, think of, like we discussed earlier, about being proactive and maybe going and learning the software. So you can then talk about that in an interview to say you've learned Xero yourself, you've watched the videos, you've done the certification. That will definitely put you ahead of the pack. And you know, if you have an entrepreneurial nature, then, and you're engaged in that kind of activity, then talk about it. I remember, because, you know, in an interview, it's about whether you connect with that person or not. People want to see that you are personable. And I remember I told some really random stories in my interview at PwC, and I think that's what got me the job. I talked about how I was involved. I think a story about when I went skiing, and I did something really random. And I talked about that. And I talked about how I used to sell mobile phones and computers at university. And I ended up selling a mobile phone to somebody who then asked for a refund. I sold it on eBay, I gave them a refund, and they didn't send me the phone back. And so I ended up taking him to court. I think I was about 18 at the time, but it was a good story to tell. And the judge ruled in my favor because I had all the evidence, and I kind of, essentially had an audit trail of all the correspondence that I had with this person about the refund of the thing that I'd sold him, and he couldn't demonstrate anything. So that kind of demonstrated that, I had a certain mindset, which obviously was attractive to the employer who ended up hiring me. So yeah, think about stories that you're able to tell that sets you apart from others, from experiences that you have gained in your life.
I was just thinking about that myself, and thinking the only thing I could think about that could be help as well is there are so many university clubs and societies, and I suppose if you become a treasurer or somebody in one of those clubs and societies, which, I mean, you can do clubs and societies, for just about anything, then that would be another way just to show that, you're obviously interested in money, and that's what, so you're a team player, be something like that. I don't know. Bit obvious, but anyway. Jack has asked, how did you manage your time when running your own business and completing your studies, Reza? Oh, he must be meaning you're selling phones on the side. How did you manage your time?
When running your own business. Oh, I see.
Must be the phones.
That was, well, it was, yeah, possibly. If that's what you mean, Jack. I guess at university I had lots of time, lots of free time. I think we had about 12 hours of lectures, so I had lots of time to do other things. And people spend their time doing lots of crazy things at university. So yeah, time was not an issue at university at all.
Yeah, it's in fact, I think we can all three of us say this, that it's a university that if you're doing any more of an arts degree, it's much less time at university than if you're doing, say, a science degree. I lived with 4 scientists and I did an arts degree, and I definitely had a lot of spare time. So, take what you will from that. Does anybody else have any more questions? Tom and Jack have obviously asked a few, but does anyone else on the call have any other questions that we could put to Reza and Linda? Otherwise, I will go back to them and I'll ask one final question. And if you were going to do it again or start again, so from hindsight and what you know now, what would you say to your 18 to 20-year-old self to help you get on further or get ahead? What advice would you give yourself, or you could give to these guys now, sitting where they are? Linda. Oh, you're... Have
you got me again?
Yeah, I've got you.
For me, I think I didn't appreciate right from the start quite how much work is involved in doing your practical training and your studying at the same time, because when you at work all day and you're learning new things every day in your training contract, in your training period, it's a lot of work. And I think if I had paced myself a little bit better and realized how much time you need to dedicate to your studies as well as to your work. And Reza mentioned it, in audit there are deadlines that have to be met, and often you're in early, you're there late, and you need to take that into account. I probably wouldn't have kind of left my really hardcore studying for just before exams. I would have paced myself and done a more sort of steady, been a bit of a tortoise really in the race. And I think that's probably what I would have done differently. But I've been very fortunate in my work experience. I've always managed to find firms that have morals and values that are important to me, and they match. And so I've actually really had a good experience. I don't think I would change any of my experience, but that would probably be my biggest thing, is letting myself know that I should just sort of a little bit every day rather than cramming at the end.
I'm going to ask Reza, there's one more question that's coming, and then I'll put that question to you too. What would you say about an apprenticeship in accounting instead of university, Reza?
Yeah, sure. I would say yes, absolutely. If you're you know, you can actually, people who have done apprenticeships have actually completed their chartered qualification before graduates, because you can leave school, you can do the AAT, which as I mentioned earlier, which you can get done if you're, you know, bright and you're doing it and you're on track. You can get that done within, you know, a couple of years. There's 3 or 4 levels: AAT 2, 3, and 4, and then you can go straight onto the ACCA or the ACA program. So you'll be at least a year, if not 2 years ahead of graduates who spent 4 years at university, because they will then start from scratch on the ACA as well. So if you are committed about pursuing a career in accountancy, you don't need to go to university. You can hop straight into the AAT. You can be working at the same time, so you can be having an income. Your employer can support you on the AAT, so you're learning at the same time as studying, and that is a much faster route to getting qualified as an ACA than going to university. So yep, absolutely, don't discount it. If that's something that you're really committed on doing, you know you want to do accountancy, then do seriously consider it.
Fab, that's really helpful. And just then, so lastly, is there any advice you can give the students, or advice you would have given yourself, or any learns along the way that you can, you know, nuggets of learning that you could impart to us?
Yeah, it's a tough one, really. Perhaps, yeah, I think Linda made a good point about being more attentive to studies and not leaving everything to the last minute. But perhaps, yeah, I would say don't discount the kind of the smaller, medium-sized firms, because, you know, I found that PwC was great, but I was still quite pigeonholed, and it would have been nice to have a wider experience across other areas of accountancy. Because when I came into a small firm that I bought into, I really didn't have much of a clue about how audit and everything else operated, because I was just in tax. So there is this mindset that when you're at university, you want to get into top 4 and you'd kind of discount the smaller firms. But nowadays, I would say, you can get a much more rounded experience in a smaller firm than you do in the big 4. So I'd say don't discount them because there's a lot of value to be had in working for a smaller firm.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, that you guys have been really helpful, and I think it's been a really clear, and you've given people a really clear understanding of your industry and the different areas within your industry, and small and large routes in. So it's been very, very helpful. And so thank you ever so much for giving your time tonight. It really is helpful to everyone. I'm sure they will say so on the chat as well. But yeah, great. Thank you. And thank you everybody for joining us. Yes, as you say, really interesting and helpful. And we've recorded this, so we'll have it for posterity. So many thanks. Good evening, and
thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye. Good luck.
Bye-bye. Cheers. Bye-bye.